Thank you, Jacob. Well, during our preliminary discussions in the organization for the organization of this conference, I was asked to speak about the war and about post-war reconstruction, and I will try to meet that request by the organizers. Yesterday, there was also another request to be a bit more optimistic, so we'll see how that will work out. but I will try. So in the outline, I will start with identifying, from my point of view, some lessons from the war so far. Then I will briefly discuss on possible trajectories of the war and on what that depends, respectively what outcome we could see and under what conditions. And finally, I will talk about principles and some priorities from my point of view. Professor Koshelenko may have a different point of view. He's much more informed on that. But maybe in that way I'll be able to put to set the ground for the coming discussion. Well, I will start with the developments prior to 2014. We will share some experience with you. I have visited Ukraine in the Soviet times a couple of times in the second half of the 80s, then a couple of times prior to 2004. The latest one was prior to 2004, or maybe in 2004, was to Kiev. And there were elections coming up, so I was, on the last day before going to the airport, I was taking a walk around, and there was this meeting of people prior to the elections, and they were waving red flags with hammer and sickle and singing. I mean, friends from the West would not know that, but I clearly remember it, 10-й наш пехотный battalion, and how they'll be getting back to power, the communists, etc. And I had some money left, and there was this beggar, and I said, okay, let me see what I have. I took out from my wallet everything I had, gave it to this beggar, and said, I'm never coming back here, okay, to Ukraine. There's nothing to do in Ukraine. But then surprisingly, 2004, the Orange Revolution came. There was another event of this project. Actually, it was led by think tank, some Center for European Security Studies from the Netherlands, and financed, I think, by the Ministry of Defense or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or both of the Netherlands. And this is a point which shows that how important it is to keep in touch and to continue investing and to continue to plant seeds that someday may grow, you know, because that visit prior to the elections and the visit after the elections were part of that same project. And then on the second visit after the Orange Revolution already, we had an opening and brief participation by the new Minister of Defense, Anatoly Gritsenko, whom I knew from my times in the US, in the Maxwell Air Force Base, the Air University, Air Command and Staff College, and Air War College. And there was this discussion and this idea to establish connections. Myself, with the experience as the first civilian director for defense planning, to work with the civilian director of the newly established Directorate for Military Policy and Strategic Planning of the Ministry of Defense. They call that expert twinning, so that's how I started going to Kiev practically every month, almost every month, for a few days, and work with the Ukrainian friends, and have so much experience. But those years in 2005, 2006, there was a lot of enthusiasm, especially in defense circle. I wouldn't say the majority of the opinion, but strongly represented view was that Ukraine needs to join NATO, it needs to become part of the European family of free and democratic and prosperous nations, etc. Although those views, as if I recall correctly, never exceeded 50%. They were always somewhere below 50% of the people. There were still people who were nostalgic and looking, I mean, not in the MOD, generally in the society. What happened, though, is described very well in the book Putin's People, or How the KGB Took Back Russia and Then Took on the West, by Catherine Belton. She describes basically Putin's career coming to power and what that led to. But it has a particular chapter on Ukraine and the developments in Ukraine, and she presents evidence that the Russians very skillfully were able to corrupt the new government and the President Yushchenko's circle, in those years, using the dependence on deliveries of gas, but also corruption, some intelligence operations, etc. It shows in later years how the separatist movement in Donbass appeared and grew up with the support of Kremlin, etc. Many other things. But my point now is that even in the wake of the Orange Revolution and this desire to join European structures, Euro-Atlantic structures, the Russians were able to penetrate the Ukrainian government, corrupt parts of it, and only 2 years later, Yanukovych, who competed with Yushchenko in the presidency in 2004 for the presidency, became prime minister after some, I think, parliamentary elections, and then already won the elections and became president. But before saying that, I will share, for example, in those years, the enthusiasm, I remember it because there was always a discussion that, okay, we want to conduct an exercise with NATO on our territory. When that was planned for the western part of Ukraine, it was okay, but they planned one for Crimea, which was successfully blocked by local protests, activists, etc. There was this website, I remember, which was, and because the question was with the Sevastopol naval base of Russia, there was this website that I remember it had on the front page Russian naval ships leaving Sevastopol in 2017 and people happily waving to them that, okay, now go back home, never come back. But one of the first things Yanukovych did when he came to power as a president was to extend the agreement with the Russians for the lease of this naval base till 2042, by 25 years. Basically Russia's presence in the Crimea, which was then they used to promote their agenda in many different ways, to undermine locally, I mean, the democratic processes, the representation, etc. Okay, I think I have that for later. Another experience, but maybe I'll share it now, the attitudes in Crimea. Even after the Orange Revolution, when Yanukovych was in power, was very strong, I visited twice Crimea, once in Yalta for some NATO SBU event, and then later for an academic conference in Sevastopol. But I remember visiting one church that had been renovated outside Sevastopol, and the guide explaining to the foreigners basically said, and after renovation, this church was opened by our two presidents. Previously, Viktor Kuchma at the time and Vladimir Putin. But I may be wrong a little bit. But anyway, that's what the guide said in Crimea, by our two presidents. So even in those times, Ukraine was not, the central government was not really able to make all the people or the majority of the people feel Ukrainian, which is one of the drawbacks. Okay, and Viktor Yanukovych did many other things. I have many personal examples from personal experience, but there's no time to share that. But obviously, he allowed Russia to penetrate First, the counterintelligence service, SBU, heavily, basically it was acting under Kremlin's guidance, to penetrate the Ministry of Defense at various levels. And that's one of the explanations for the success of the operation with the little green men, the annexation of Crimea, and then the support to the separatists in Donbass. It's not so much that Gerasimov is a genius and that he has how to conduct hybrid warfare, etc., but basically the security establishment of Ukraine was very heavily penetrated by Russia's interests. Okay, what happened after 2014? We all know about the, by now everyone knows it, the infamous Minsk agreements that the international community supposedly relied on to pacify Ukraine and the Russians and stop the conflict and stop the casualties. But I participated in one conference I think it was in Bucharest, with Vladimir Sokor, analyzing Minsk agreements, and he already in 2015 or 16 said, that's nonsense, that's never going to work, it's not going to lead to any sustainable, peaceful resolution. It's in the interest of the Russians, more or less. But who was part of that Minsk agreements, the sponsor? France and Germany. Angela Merkel, and at that time I think François Hollande were behind it, and Ukraine was not able to achieve anything else. Anyway, we had a regime of sanctions on Russia after 2014 imposed. And it led to some positive developments and to some, unfortunately, negative developments. And the one that is positive, but it's often forgotten, is that the Russians had a contract with France to procure 2 Mistral-class assault ships, big ones, carrying helicopters and several hundred Marines, each one, for 2 such. And the French kind of kept the eyes closed and tried to continue with this project, but under pressure from other allies, they decided to cancel this deal, and the Russians did not get those 2 ships. I think that if they had gotten those ships, it's very likely that they would have taken Odessa quickly in the first month of the war, but they did not have the capability. So that's one of the positive examples. I have to admit I don't have another one. But there are many negative examples showing that the sanctions did not really work. When the war started and Ukrainians started capturing some tanks, some armored vehicles, they found inside French, and I think primarily French, but not only, I think Italian equipment inside, some sensors inside these combat management systems, etc., that had been procured after 2014. What is better known are the gas deals that continued in the business as usual format, in particular the desire of Angela Merkel's government to build this Nord Stream 2 project and to increase the reliance of Europe on Russian gas. What is less known in the West, but that's the South Stream project, which the Bulgarian government allowed to be built. And thus, it was called South Stream, then Balkan Stream, Turkish Stream. I'm not sure even what's the name currently. But it allowed, in this way, European governments, democratic governments, allowed Russia to bypass Ukraine for the delivery of gas. And when that was ready, that was one of the conditions that Russia can launch a large-scale aggression against Ukraine, because it had already alternative routes to deliver gas to Europe and to make big money and sustain the war effort. Okay? And all that happened under sanctions, unfortunately. There are many positive things in terms of defense preparedness of Ukraine at that time. I think I mentioned that earlier. Instead of contracting and multi-year projects to acquire big platforms, etc., Ukraine increased the defense expenditure significantly, and focused on education and training, on personal equipment, commercial off-the-shelf technologies, mission-oriented command. That's extremely important. I think also I put it on the next slide, or a couple of slides later. And creating a professional corps of young officers and NCOs. And this is what gave it the advantage in the first weeks of the war, significant advantage over the Russians. All those efforts were, some of those efforts were implemented with the support by Western partners. And working closely with Western partners, Ukraine managed to gain their trust, which was extremely important for the following developments. And when we look at the initial weeks of the aggression, what allowed actually Ukraine to stop that aggression? You know that many governments thought that, okay, it may not be 3 days, but it will be a week or two, and the Zelensky government will be out, and the Russians will take control of Ukraine, or a significant part of Ukraine. There is information that some Western governments invited Zelensky to flee the country and to go to establish whatever, but which he did not do, fortunately. But gaining the partners' trust had a significant impact. That allowed Western governments to share intelligence information in Ukraine prior to the war, that there is this aggression coming. And then in the first weeks to continue sharing information, and I guess that they continue to do that even now. And based on that intelligence warnings, also Western governments supplied Ukraine with anti-tank and air defense missiles. The small ones, MAN-PADS, it's man-portable air defense systems. That's what it means, like Stinger type of systems, Javelins and NLAWs, which allowed Ukraine, in addition with the intelligence information, to stop the Russia's tank columns coming from Belarus. You remember that story with the 50 or 60 kilometer tank column. Everyone was scared. Ukrainians were happy because they were just annihilating them with having those systems in place. That actually continued. One of the key moments in the first week was when the Russians took Gostomel, the airport which is practically in the boundaries of Kiev. And they prepared an operation with this VDV, the Воздушно-десантные войска assault troops. Like they had prepared, I don't remember, 10 or 12 airplanes with several hundred special forces at each one. And the first one was shot down by Ukrainians using intelligence provided by partners. And when they shot down the first one, the rest did not fly out. And maybe that saved Kiev. We don't know at the moment yet. We do not have the full information, but all this was very important to hold against this initial aggression. Obviously, Ukraine had active territorial defense forces and reserves at a much higher level of readiness compared to 2014. I even remember reading before the aggression in social media what the Ukrainians are advising now, okay? This guy, keep quiet when the war starts. I mean, keep the gas tank of your car full when the war starts. Wake up your kids, your wife, put them in the car, take them to a safe place, go back and go to join your unit and fight the Russians and kill the Russians. And that was kind of this type of prepare water, prepare this, prepare that. That happened before the war. But that may sound trivial, but in fact it isn't that trivial. And the readiness of the units obviously was much higher. Unlike 2014, I remember visiting Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. In Kramatorsk, we visited units that were sending troops like every 12 hours or every 24 hours to the line of contact with the Russian troops. And we talked to them and I asked them, okay, what will happen if they attack here? And the soldiers, it's obviously, unlike 2014 when, for example, a ship commander went to the Russian side with the whole crew. Okay? And many units just gave up without fighting or anything. Then only a couple of years later, soldiers were saying, no, we'll fight them. No way they can succeed here. This preparedness and gaining and maintaining the moral high ground was extremely important. What everyone has seen, the outstanding leadership by President Zelensky and his team is a key factor for holding that. He did not accept these offers to go to a safe place abroad, stayed on the ground. On the day 2 or day 3, he went out on the streets, gave interviews on the streets, etc. The capacity for professional communication played also a key role in my view. Ukraine has invested, possibly with the support by Western partners in this, so very professionally from day 1, they started informing the public, everyone. This is what happened, the Russians attacked here, they hold this, but we hold this, etc. Very professional Stratcom. Crowdsourcing of intelligence and Maskirovka played a role because the people were having the moral high ground. Everyone, every regular citizen was invited to provide information when they see, especially in the first days, Russian Special Forces teams within Kiev and within other cities, and they say, if you see someone, report. People did that. And then also I use the Russian term maskirovka, camouflage, hiding. People were advised not to put pictures online so that the Russians can estimate battle damage they have inflicted, etc. People do that, very disciplined. I even remember visiting my colleague in last summer, Alexei Reznikov, in Odessa. We gave a press conference at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I told the journalists, please do not let out any information about this. We can tell you when you can do that. This will be probably about midnight. And when I was already on the border after Reni, with Moldova and then Romania, and I said, okay, some guy said to me, okay, now the first news came up at midnight. So for 8 hours, 7-8 hours, the journalists, big crowd of journalists, Ukrainians and international journalists there in Odessa, no one let anything, which is really important for that effort. And the access to commercial information. No matter how much Ukraine invests in cybersecurity, the Russians managed to take down the governmental communication system in the first hours of the war, but very quickly Ukraine found a commercial alternative, and it is still there. On the lessons learned, I'm putting this mission command on the first place. Unlike the Russians, who expect the orders from higher levels and don't do anything without getting orders, Ukrainian officer corps, young officers, NCO, were taught in the interim period of this, what is known in the West as mission command, mission-oriented command, or Auftragstaktik, if you want, what the British style, American style, German style, and they were able to demonstrate initiative, to exploit any opportunity that was showing up without expecting orders from higher headquarters, etc. The second lesson is that this sensor-to-shooter cycle, find the target, decide who have to shoot on it, estimate damage, was shortened extremely compared to previous conflicts. So they say if you go and shoot with a howitzer, immediately after shooting, take it down, go away. If you don't do that, you'll be killed very quickly. So that's compared to previous conflicts, a significant difference. Balancing mass with advanced technologies. Here in Western, because Bulgaria is kind of a Western country, although we're to the east of Europe, we tend to think that, okay, you invest, buy the most advanced fighter plane, you have a squadron or two and you're fine. But no, the conflict shows that mass is still important. You still need a lot of guns, a lot of barrels, a lot of ammunition. At the same time, balancing that with the implementation of advanced technologies. And when we talk about advanced technologies, the first thing that comes to mind are drones that are aerial, on the ground, in the sea surface, under the sea surface, many types of drones. They are short range, these FPVs that are practically replacing, not fully entirely replacing, but to a large extent replacing the short range artillery. By now, you have medium range drones, long range drones. Someone was analyzing how many of those strategic ammunition warehouses of Russia within Europe, on the west of Ural Mountains, Ukrainians can reach by now. It turns out they can reach many of them. And the one at Toropets was, the other day, was an enormous achievement. As I mentioned that later. They destroyed 30,000 tons of ammunition in a strategic warehouse, including ballistic missiles, supposed missiles from North Korea, S-300 and S-400 missiles, and many others. And also, these drones are of different types. Some do reconnaissance. Eventually, they are used for targeting purposes. Others are used as kamikaze to kill a target being destroyed itself. They are drones with weapon loads that can be used multiple times. What we are seeing literally in the last week or two are anti-air drones, when drones attack other drones, which is a lot of developments. That's the most visible, but also very important are developments in electronic warfare. Both sides are, and counter-electronic warfare, both sides are utilizing such means increasingly. The capabilities for long-range precision strikes. Actually, this ammunition facility in Toropets is close to 600 kilometers from Ukrainian territory, 500-600 kilometers, and no Western weapon system was used. So Ukrainians developed their own. Then they have been very good in crowdsourcing innovative solutions and expanding and solidifying their defense technological and industrial base, on some cases with Western support, but sometimes on indigenous developments. What are the possible trajectories? Someone is watching their watch. So there are, in my view, two key drivers that will define the outcome of this war. The first one is the resilience of the Ukrainian society and respectively its capacity to withstand adverse effects and mobilize additional resources continuously to maintain the war effort. And the second one is the continuation of Western political or non-continuation of Western political, diplomatic, financial, and military support to Ukraine, and respectively the effectiveness of the sanctions on Russia. And not only on Russia, but those countries that provide Russia with weapon systems and in other ways support its military efforts. And the main factor that will define how these two drivers will play out is, and in their interplay, is the effectiveness of Russia's efforts to undermine Western democracies and Ukrainian social cohesion and morale. And the Russian efforts in that respect are significant, no matter what they do at the war, at the front lines, and what the war exacts. They're continue to invest a lot on the West to manipulate public opinion, perceptions, attitudes, decision-making, as was very eloquently explained yesterday in the afternoon, in a divide and conquer manner. They use any issues appearing in order to divide societies. For example, I will list just a few of them. The COVID-19, where it came from, who is responsible for that, what the vaccines are about, to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. Very successful disinformation campaigns of the Russians. Here in Bulgaria, particularly strong was the debate on the Istanbul Convention, which is related to an extent to the LGBT rights, not to go any deeper to that. On the provisions of weapons, ammunition, humanitarian support to Ukraine, support to refugees all the time. Well, help the refugees, we're so poor here. This is a very strong message and influential among part of the Bulgarian society. Paris Olympics was a particular case here. People quarreled for weeks, whether it was good or it was bad, and particularly for the opening ceremony. And one case which is ridiculous but very, very fresh. Here on Tuesday evening there was this tennis match between Novak Djokovic, 24 times Grand Slam winner, and Grigor Dimitrov, who is the best Bulgarian tennis players. And Djokovic said at one point to the DJ, "Let me hear this particular song." And the DJ said, "No, I won't." And now for 2 days, two full days, here the social networks are boiling with arguments and quarrels. Why he did that, was he right or not, etc. Who is Djokovic, who is DJ to do that? Political, even relating that to some individual political issues. That's in case when, with the pager story, you know, with the Hezbollah, very quickly they said the pagers are produced in Taiwan, I think. Taiwan said, no, they are not here. The lights went towards a Hungarian company. A Hungarian news outlet said, no, it's a Bulgarian company. No one here says anything until this morning. This morning there was a reaction of the counterintelligence service only. But for practically 3 days, everyone discusses Djokovic and the DJ, Djokovic and the DJ, all the media. And for the Russians, that's great because when they are able to create more clear and deeper dividing lines, numerous groups start confronting each other, quarreling with each other. People lose their trust in any media source, any source of information. Say, why would I care, basically? And that's already a success for the Russians. And their disinformation campaign continues. I'll show you here the results of actually a sociological survey that was conducted 3 times with some questions were repeated 3 times in February, in April 22, in October 22, and then in February this year again. This one was in April 22, 2 months within the war. And they asked him, people were asked, representative study, solid methodology created by the same sociological agency. So reliable data. People were asked, who do you sympathize with in this conflict? And 23% were still sympathizing with Russia, 32 plus with Ukraine. A lot more than 40% did not have an opinion. Compared to other countries, our European countries, that doesn't look good. But when you have in mind that prior to the aggression, Putin had the support probably of more than 50% of the people, obviously the aggression by a bigger country towards a nuclear-armed country, towards a small country without nuclear arms. There was already information on the atrocities in Bucha and Irpin, etc. that had an impact. But see what happens later. By October 22, 6 months later, the sympathies to Russia dropped by 3%, because there were many other news. Kramatorsk killing, and Mariupol killing a theater where kids were hiding, etc. So the support to Russia dropped. But the support to Ukraine dropped even further, by 9%. And the people who were undecided already became over 50%. And if you look by February this year, the sympathies with Russia are higher than the sympathies to Ukraine. The situation got in return. In the beginning of the war, it was 10% more sympathized with Ukraine. By the spring of this year, 10% more sympathized with Ukraine. And again, the ones undecisive, they are over 50%. That shows how vulnerable, that the Russians continue to invest consistently big efforts into shaping public opinions, and that works for them. So what we can do to counter that, Stratcom obviously, investing into critical thinking, education, that is important. But also one needs to understand the particular context, cultural, historical, specifics, political situation, etc. Another statement I have here, that one cannot counter disinformation effectively by just countering disinformation. You need to understand the bigger picture. To use, in that bigger picture, you need to look at transparency of media ownership, the financial flows, who is paying to that media, do they have codes of ethics, are they implemented properly or not? And one needs a comprehensive approach, understanding how Russia has an impact through its economic footprint, through dependencies on some essential services, through corruption, through political influence, cultural ties, I put that in quotation marks here, etc. And international collaboration is necessary. What can be done for the future to define these outcomes, understanding that Russia is still undermining and it's rather successful, more in some countries than in others, but it basically invests everywhere, accounting for the local specifics. And what can we do in that respect to achieve a more favorable outcome of the war? Because now various outcomes are possible depending on the interplay of the key drivers. I will not go into detail, maybe during the discussion. My response to that, when say, will Ukraine accept exchange of territories for peace, for example, I always say on media, it's up to the Ukrainian people and leadership to decide which outcome is acceptable. It's not to us. But we need to change the narratives. And I see that Ukraine is making efforts in that respect. And because the prevailing narrative in the West, NATO and the European Union, I have also recited that myself in many meetings, is that we'll support Ukraine as long as it takes. Okay, everyone is saying that. This is the formula. Not sufficient. Not sufficient. We need to support Ukraine on its path to victory. We'll see next week what will happen with Zelensky's visit to New York and the discussions with President Biden and possibly the two candidates for the presidency. We'll see how that works. But Ukraine needs to maintain, and we need to help Ukraine with that, the international discussion on post-war arrangements, including discussion on Russia's obligation, for example, paying reparations and reconstruction. And it will be good if some reconstruction efforts are undertaken even now with international involvement. For example, mine clearing in certain areas that are a bit further from the front line, etc. Basically, this idea that the war will end, Ukraine will be in a more or less good position after the war. We need to help it to recover. And when we think about recovery and reconstruction, one principle in, I'm sure Jacob, you said you have worked on disaster management. You know that Sendai Hyogo framework, which is basically applied to disasters, is build back better. Not just rebuild what you had earlier, but do it much better. And when you do that, you need to provide coordinated use of various funding sources, start discussing arrangements to keep a momentum. Even now, I mean, the end of the war is not very near, unfortunately, but the discussion needs to go on because, as far as I'm aware, it died. This discussion. There was discussion last year, for example, but this year I have practically not heard much about reconstruction. But this dialogue needs to go. And when this reconstruction goes on, the efforts need to be, and activities, initiatives, projects, programs need to be aligned with requirements and contributions to future EU membership. And here, Ukraine will be in good position to offer and discuss contributions through its defense industrial base, supply chain security, rare earth materials, etc. And with focusing not on, and not discussing everything, but focusing on areas where it had shown some excellence, and it's of interest to Europe and beyond Europe. On the priorities for reconstruction, I would put here, but these are just food for thought. Last night I was thinking, I was scratching my head and said, okay, what should be a priority? Not that I have done a study or anything, but one is reintegration of military personnel, very, very carefully, because if you have people who have spent years on the front lines and feel frustrated and underappreciated, you may see developments you don't want to see. So reintegration in the society is important. It's important to seek particular niches for the realization of people with disabilities as a result of the war. Konstantin yesterday, I think, said that you have 300,000 already people with disabilities. I think that was on one of your slides. Providing conditions for, that are adequate for bringing back immigrants. That would be a huge problem, because now you have over 6 million abroad. Not many of them, after spending several years and settling down in a certain environment, would be willing, but you need those people. And you need to consider ways to populate previously occupied territories and reintegrate the people who have lived years under occupation. This will be, in my view, from a last night after dinner, just for a few minutes, the key priorities to consider in the reconstruction efforts. And this is my final slide, how that relates to defense. Develop a robust defense infrastructure, because no matter what the outcome is, Ukraine will remain a frontline country. Okay? And then you would need, Ukraine, I'm looking at Konstantin, would need to offer to host as many as possible NATO or closely aligned centers of excellence on operational, tactical issues, particular technologies, innovation, because the interest will be high. You just need to exploit that, not to send your own people everywhere else, but to do that in Ukraine. Ukraine will need to integrate its defense education institutions within the NATO-EU system of defense education, really important. Create with others multinational formations, actively participate in that, joint capability development projects, etc. So, as I said, especially these last few slides are just food for thought. I do not have a slide for conclusion. Thank you for the attention, and I think we'll continue discussion now. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Tagarev, for that insightful discussion. And I would like to invite Professor Koshulenko to join us on the stage for a short Q&A. And then we'll all have some coffee afterwards. Today, I'd like to thank both speakers and in particular Professor Tagarev for his insightful talk today. I promise today I won't have all the questions myself, and will open some more up to the audience. I saw many people taking notes frantically. Perhaps I can start with the question about, which I think is very important that you mentioned on the last slide, around reconstruction, and just some thoughts around how we can bring that back to the agenda. I know you mentioned last year it was there, and then perhaps Kostya can come in with ideas about the continued investment in digital transformation and how we can make that a success, also post-conflict. If I could ask Todor first and then Kostya afterwards, please.
Well, from Kostya's presentation, we know that Ukraine is even now, during the war, investing a lot in digital transformation, introducing digital technologies with properly, not just buying computers or software packages, but thinking about the processes, the people, the effects, etc. And it will be important, in particular, when we think of these people with disabilities. I mean, I think that's a huge niche. They may decide to start providing online education or other types of education to those people, so that they feel and they are useful. I'm sure that many Western countries will be interested in the use of digital technologies and the transformation within the military, but also beyond in that experience. And that might be one of the, what I decided to call on the slide, towers of excellence of Ukraine, that it can share the experience with others, and so that for the mutual benefit.
Thank you so much. Please, Kosti, if you want to add something, please.
First of all, thank you, Todor, for this great presentation. You need to know that I agree with your statements on 90%, maybe 10% disagree, but it depends. It's our discussion. I think it's happy to meet you here, and I think that we continue discussion after this panel. But and thank you, Todor, for talk about digital innovation in the field of social support. But Tony asked about military innovation, and I'm not military professional, but I know some things. And digital military solution is really important because it's about streamlined communication. And my colleagues from Ministry of Defense have implemented Delta. Delta is advanced battlefield management system and situational awareness. Delta helps commanders make faster and more informed decisions to protect and support our troops. This is one important solution. Delta, it's connected with NATO standards, and I think that it's a good story to use Ukrainian experience from this software. Russian don't have something like that. And another important solution, it's a solution for soldiers, Army Plus. You can download it from Apple Store or Android, but you don't have possibility to use it. This is only for Ukrainian soldiers, and for them it's about military ID. It's about electronic reports and real-time surveys of our soldiers. And from my side, from Ministry of Social Policy, we build a lot of informational exchange with different informational systems from different ministries, and with Ministry of Defense too. This exchange important because they ensure that individuals eligible for deferment from mobilization, such as parents of multiple children, big families, and people with disability, receive it automatically. This is just our collaboration in this in support of huge work with citizens in sphere of mobilization, because mobilization it's a really hard task and big task today for Ukraine. And I urge the democratic nation to support Ukrainian defenders and learn from their experience. Thank you.
Thanks you so much for that, Kostya. And maybe we can build on that in terms of, you've done a lot of work in terms of digital transformation on the home front. And then how vulnerable were your systems to cyber attacks during this time? And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how you guys defended against that. And maybe then afterwards Todor can come in.
Dear Tony, you ask something, you ask this question like a spy. I think that, yes, absolutely, digital transformation and cyber defense are deeply interconnected. And yes, we always think about how to build efficient, client-oriented, robust solution in one hand, and in another hand, we always think how to build this system, this system hard to Russian hackers to crack it. And yes, I can't share everything in details, but the secret to our current resilience, I think, lies both in the coordinated work of different Ukrainian government bodies, humanitarian ministries like ours and secret government bodies who are responsible for cybersecurity in deep state, etc., and collaboration with our international partners in sphere of technical support. Because, you know, it's very important to use cloud computing, cloud storages now, for example, because in Ukraine our data center has a lot of risks, and cybersecurity it's only one. Rocket hitting is another one. That's why today we use cloud storages from Microsoft Azure, Amazon, and we're really grateful for these companies who support us more than 2 years to give these storages. Now I have a problem because a goodwill sometimes is over, and now I'm waiting partners or donors to use cloud storage in the next year. For me, this is not about cybersecurity, but a really big infrastructure risk, because it's not only direct hitting to my data center. It's about direct hitting to electrical station near my data center, hitting to the building who connect with another infrastructure in this district. And that's why, for me, from my experience, from experience of my colleagues, this cloud solution is perfect for cybersecurity of our databases, our systems too. And it's not only about storages, it's about collaboration of our team. We really work closely with Microsoft representatives in Ukraine, in the United States, to make, to not just make a copy of our system in the cloud, but to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Todor, would you like to come in with anything on cyber?
I would, but there's very little information. Unlike the period from 2014 till February 2022, when there were 2 well-studied attacks on the energy infrastructure, there were this non-Petya attack that was mentioned yesterday. There were known cases when the Russians exploited the information from the personal phone of a soldier for targeting purposes, or the Russians were sending SM messages to Ukrainian soldiers on the line of contact that, oh, you know, your comrades already surrendered, run away or surrender quickly and stuff. But that was prior to 2002. Since the war started, we know a little bit about the attack that took down the governmental communications infrastructure, just coinciding with the start of the aggression, and not much more than that. We know that Ukraine is also investing in electronic surveillance. I think it was on one of my slides. That case for the New Year Eve in 2022, 2023, when they registered many phone calls from a single place, hit it and killed several hundred Russian soldiers. But I'm not aware of many other stories. Like cybersecurity is certainly critical. This digitalization is critical, but I emphasized more the situational awareness. But if you have this IT system that provides you awareness, but wait for the higher command 4 levels up to make a decision and receive the orders, time is gone. You need that to be used in parallel with this mission command, the changed culture of the soldiers, the responsibilities of initiative, and that's why I emphasize that aspect, where Ukraine did very well prior to 22.
Thank you so much for that, and I think there'll be a few military officers in here that enjoyed the discussion about the decentralized command, and of course I like that it was balanced in the presentation with the need still for that weaponry and resources, because it still is, there's an element of attrition. For the sake of time, and thank you so much, I'm going to open up to the audience for some questions. And just on a personal level, I did like that when we spoke about reconstruction at the end and how we can build it even during the war and build it better. Thank you so much, Kostya. So if I could ask you to just to introduce yourself and your question, please, Peter. I see your hands up.
Thank you. My name is Peter de Klerk, former UN official. Professor Tagarev, thank you very much for really a brilliant and a very comprehensive and inclusive type of analysis. And particularly, as what Tony was saying, the forward-looking element, I very much appreciate it. And I want to go back to a term that you used, which is very sensitive in my circles, building back better. So the first time we used that term in my recollection was in Haiti. I leave it to your imagination where we are now. But this was after the earthquake, and we're going to build back an infrastructure that was going to withstand the next earthquake. And indeed, when the next earthquake came, we did absolutely nothing. We built back exactly the same Port-au-Prince, the capital that we had before. And fortunately, the earthquake hit elsewhere, so the effect wasn't that bad, but basically the same thing happened. So what does that mean, building back better? And to me, it's very much not just about remedial actions. So what do we do to rebuild? But also to prevent future problems occurring in the same way, particularly in terms of the relationship between people that remain behind, and you made reference to that. But also to build in elements of reconciliation and social cohesion. And for that, what's really important for building back better is the local ownership of that solution. The international community will have 100,000 ideas how Ukraine should rebuild and all these wonderful things we've done elsewhere. But how do you come up with that local ownership? And I can see how innovative you are already on the Ukrainian side, but can you give me an idea how you build that local ownership into the concept of building back better in post-conflict Ukraine? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think for yourself, a tough question.
Well, I think you elaborated on that already, and I have full confidence that Ukraine is not Haiti or Somalia or Sudan, and will do much, much more better. Actually, what I expect and would advise is that they take the initiative and not wait for a ready-made solution, one-size-fits-all solutions proposed from the West, but they take the initiative requesting, defining priorities, defining requirements, and requesting support respectively. But indeed, it's a very, in Haiti they had a strong earthquake, but it did not destroy as many buildings as the Russians did in Mariupol or Bakhmut or elsewhere. So I even don't know whether you need to rebuild the same buildings and boulevards, or you need to go outside and build a new city and then think what to do. But it will be up to the Ukrainians to decide and lead, and it will be good if they have the initiative. If they get different offers, that's all right. Then study the offers, see, think what would be most suitable, and go for it.
Thank you so much. Kosti, do you want to add anything?
I just want to talk that build back better is really good idea and really good target for all of us. Yes, we try to rebuild Ukraine in more efficient way, in more efficient format, in more client-oriented, citizen-oriented format. And yes, now we work on our demographic strategy. And yes, we plan to be a country, a magnet for people, not just a country who asks for our people, please come back. We try to rebuild a modern European country, which interesting to people around the world to visit it, to work in this country, to live in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll take one more question from of course the boss. We can't say no.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Your Excellencies, for very great presentation. You said something, Professor Tagarev, which I found very interesting. You said gaining and maintaining, you said, the moral high ground as one of the key factors that helped with holding back that initial aggression from Russia. And he said that was extremely important, and I agree. However, the graph that you showed indicates a waning support for Ukraine in terms of public opinion, a waning sympathy for Ukraine and an increasing sympathy for Russia. Where did we go wrong? I mean, what went wrong? Is it that moral high ground waned on the side of Ukraine? Or would you say instead that when morality met with other concepts like nationalism, pragmatism, that morality would eventually cave in?
That data and those sociological surveys were conducted here in Bulgaria, and not in Ukraine. They're in Bulgaria. So it is just a demonstration on the readiness of Kremlin to continue to invest in propaganda against the interests of the democratic countries and against their support to Ukraine as a consequence of that. And it's a strong indicator. It's also a strong indicator that we failed in countering that propaganda, although many of our allies understand the problem we have and are ready and willing to help, and they're sending teams here, and they're conducting Stratcom courses for, I don't know how many people have already passed through those courses, but that's not sufficient. That's not sufficient when they have the political influence, and yesterday we had a very good presentation on that, when they practically own some political parties here in the country that are trying to set the agenda. We still have not found the answer. Ukraine is, I'm sure it's maintaining that battle, moral high ground. It's a matter of withstanding the adverse effects, because 2.5 years, soon 3 years of war, that's a lot. That's a long time. That's a lot of suffering. But the problem there is different. Although I would be surprised if the Russians do not try to apply similar tactics towards the Ukrainian population. Similar, it won't be the same.
Yes, they try, yeah.
It won't be the same. It will be, you know, you're not getting food, or you do not have electricity 20 hours out of 24 hours because that guy there is corrupt. You know, you have to go and now ask him, or your government is corrupt or something. That tactics, it's tailored, I'm sure. It's tailored, and the attempts are there. And I hope Ukraine will withstand, the Ukrainian society will withstand that type of propaganda.
Kosti, are you happy with that? Do you want to add anything?
I just need to add that, yes, it's great that we have another statistic in Ukraine and another statistic worldwide, but yes, Russia invests a lot of resources on propaganda, and yes, we need to make something to stop it. And yes, I'm grateful for you, Jacob, for possibility to talk you here, because I think that only just our collaboration, only just our dialogues, only just our public position can change something, because we don't need to make a fighting between Russian and Ukrainian propaganda, or Russian and American propaganda, Bulgarian propaganda. I think that we just need to be more open, more transparent. Our communication want to be more efficient. We need to have more influencers, more ambassadors, more people who support Ukraine and make it really loud, not only just in private things. And I think that we need to continue. Yes, 3 years of the war, of the full-scale invasion, 10 years of the war. You know, my daughter, name of my daughter, Victoria, because 10 years ago, when she was born, we named she, with wife, we named she Victoria because we faith in the victory of Ukraine. It's the first year of Russian invasion, 2014, Crimea, Donetsk, Donbass. And now I think that we need to try to continue. It's a marathon, it's not sprint. We need to find motivation, we need to find new motivation, we need to find new arguments, we need to find new weakness in Russia propaganda, in Russia, and try to move forward.
You'll forgive me, Colonel Dobril, as a quick question. And then I promise you we'll go for coffee after that. I apologize.
Thank you. Good luck with getting a short question from me, but I'll give it my try. So, and I'm very well aware and cognizant that Professor Tagarev was my boss twice, as already mentioned, and I would like to keep my job, so I'll try not to be too provocative, asking him a question, but here it goes. We already have established, sir, that the results you showed with the polls mean that we either are not doing enough or are not doing the right things to counter Russian information aggression and cognitive warfare in Bulgaria, which actually is one of the centers of gravity for the fight in Ukraine, because support for Ukraine is one of the centers of gravity of the war effort there. And the title of the conference might, I remind you, have the word war. So the question is, can we win this fight just staying in the cognitive domain and responding? And second part of the question is, can we win by just defending? And I would repeat what our Ukrainian friends, I learned from them, you cannot win a game of chess if the other side is fighting box. And yes, Ukrainians are clearly in the box fight already, but we keep tricking ourselves that we're playing a chess game. And that's a sure way to win, to lose, I would say. Back to you, sir. Thank you.
Well, we certainly can. Whether we will and when is a different question. But that's why I said that you don't fight disinformation by countering disinformation. You need a comprehensive approach. This approach is not symmetric. The fact that Russia tries to manipulate public opinion here does not mean that we need to launch an attempt to manipulate Russia's public opinion. I don't think that's a viable way, but we need to take this comprehensive look, understand the reasons why Russia's propaganda is so successful, and in this comprehensive effort to address each factor, each venue that makes their propaganda effective here, which this study shows that Bulgarians do not know their own history. We don't know our own history. We don't know the history of the relations, the actual relations between Russia and Bulgaria. The propaganda is that Russia has always been our friend, it's our liberator, we need to respect it eternally. While in fact, we have fought with Russians a couple of times in the last century. Russia has declared war on Bulgaria. Russia has occupied Bulgaria. People just do not know that, the majority. Of course, whoever wants can find the sources. And that goes to history books. And when speaking to the Atlantic Council in Washington in January, I just mentioned for one sentence that we need to review the history books. You remember what was the outcry here in Parliament? They all went on me saying, no, what you want to do, you want now to manipulate, you want this, you want that. When you have in Parliament, in plenary, voices that overwhelm the voices of the rational people, you cannot succeed. I wish to be more optimistic. Yes, we can win, but okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. Yes, we can win, but yes, it's not about standard solution, standard decision, etc. Yes, it's about asymmetrical solution, asymmetrical decision. It's something like David versus Goliath. And yes, we try to make this asymmetrical decision in different fields. In the battlefields, with all these drones, with all these new technologies, with all this new application, in our social sphere field, because it's our human capital, we try to work with human capital more efficient, we try to support human more efficient, because it's a mistake when we talk about victory and we talk only about weapon. And it's a mistake when we talk about recovery and we talk about only just concrete or glass or bricks or etc. We can talk about people, because human capital defend country, human capital can recover a country, and that's why I think that we need more this asymmetrical asymmetrical solutions for Ukraine. And yes, we open to be a sandbox for every company, every startup, every country who try to make experiment, who try to make something really powerful. We open for game changers in every sphere, really in every sphere. We open to try, make experiments, because we understand that Russia is really huge. They had a lot of people, and they don't think about these people, and they have a lot of resources, and don't think about these resources. And yes, when we talk about sanction, we understand then they have alternative channels to distribute their oil, etc. And yes, they use money from our partners to war too. And yes, when rockets flies to Ukraine, it's Russian rockets, but it's not only Russian rockets, it's rockets from Iran, it's rockets from North Korea, but sometimes it's rocket with component from democratic countries, from private companies who operate in democratic countries, but it's really, we need to be more strong in this decision, because we really lie for themselves. When on one hand we talk about support, we invest money to support Ukraine, you invest money to support our military, our humanitarian field, and on the other hand, Russia has used modern Western technologies in their military weapon. Russia can use money from different European countries from around the world using this fleet, non-official fleet for their resources, etc. And I think that we need to cut this all Russian shortcuts. We need to cut it, because when we try to work in this regime, when in one hand we are strong and with idea to support Ukraine, and in another hand we give for Russia these shortcuts, excuse me, sorry. It will not be finished when we try to work in this scenario. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we can give everyone, both of our speakers, a big round of applause.